Hey guys, Dirty H here and welcome back to episode 10 of San Francisco. And it is Airports DLC time and I'm excited. This is one fantastic DLC and we go hardcore in this episode. Just in case you live under a rock, a brand new DLC is out for our favourite game, City Skylines, and it allows us to build some pretty cool custom airports with modular style buildings and runways. And I was lucky enough to get my game going only a day after the update, but you are going to see some funky things going on, man. I've only really just managed to get it going, and I've narrowed down the funky stuff to just a couple of manageable things that are more annoying than game breaking. And here I'm pleased to introduce the first one. I've called it Spiky McClip-a-lot, and it looks really ugly, but it's actually really easy to fix, and I haven't figured it out at this part of the video, but I do later on. Alright, so that's enough of the bad stuff anyway. So this airport is obviously going to be based on San Francisco International Airport, and I didn't know much about this until I started studying it, but I'm very excited to be following a real life blueprint straight away with this new DLC. It really means that not only can I build a cool airport, but the whole thing is going to be functional in brand new ways. So let's jump onto Google Earth and have a look at the airport and see what it looks like. So we can see here it's out on this peninsula right here, and I guess the first thing I will say is we're doing a scaled down version of this. I mean, this thing here would be literally half the size of the entire peninsula if I was to rebuild this in City Skylines, so that has to be said straight away. So we can see here that the main parts of the design are, it comes directly off the highway. The highway is very close indeed. It has one terminal here in front of another, and it looks like the road goes underneath the first terminal and then into a roundabout style at this far terminal. So this is going to be the main principles that I follow. So there's also heaps of other areas that I haven't mentioned, like a cargo area where there's like a train that comes in, and there's also a little metro or something of the like that runs around just the airport, and that must be just to taxi people from one terminal to another maybe, you know, obviously it's quite large. So in regards to how we're going to build this in City Skylines, I'm going to have two terminals facing each other so that it sort of creates one end of the loop, and I'm using the modern terminal for that one, and then the terminal closest to us is going to be the really ultra modern one, because a lot of the times we see airports with one part upgraded and maybe they have plans to upgrade the rest of it in future. So I'm hoping that helps make it look a little bit more realistic as well. Now you may have noticed that I'm doing mine a little bit backwards. Now that I've got the terminals pretty much where I want them, I'm going to do the road connection coming in before I do anything else. And I guess the reason why I've done this is because the other end of the airport is on reclaimed land, so I can just terraform more land out into the bay if I need to make it larger. But coming back this way, I'm really governed by how far I can push this highway over, and I'm going to move this just enough so we can get a pretty cool looking interchange that comes in here and services all of these terminals. So as we seen on Google Earth earlier, the road that comes through and services the far terminals goes underneath that terminal in front, which I thought was really cool. So obviously with our scaled down version here, we're not following this like for like, but I am following that principle of having that loop. So one of these roads is going up and looping around to the top airport connection, and the other one is coming in and servicing that lower terminal. And if you haven't already noticed, one of the things I'm battling with is the terrain. It's not terraforming when I'm moving these roads, which is making things really difficult, but again I battle through. So all of those roads are set up, and the next thing I move on to is I want to create a connection down here in the middle of this loop and put in a bus stop. Now I know we get a fancy bus stop that I can connect directly to the Concourse, but I'm going to go with a classic bus stop here right down the bottom in the middle of this road loop. So the idea with that is I'm going to create a multi-storied car park here that's following that real life one that we've seen. Not very closely admittedly, but yeah, it's still following that design. So before we get on to that, I want to finish all of these connections off the highway so that we're all set up the moment the airport is plumbed up and the runways are down. It should be all go from there. So in terms of this interchange in real life, I'm not following the blueprint that much at all. I'm really just trying to connect these roads up and make them work in the game. In saying that, I do want them to look somewhat nice and have them make sense. But essentially, I've got to bring in two separate highway connections here. I've got to bring in one that goes underneath here and services the far terminals, and then another one that comes in very short and abruptly and services this front terminal. And of course both of those need 2 exits per terminal, so I end up installing like 6 or 8 exits out onto the highway, which was really difficult. But I made a point to at least try my best with that because I want this to be very smooth and basically just optimized as much as I can. As tempting as it is to just keep pushing on and putting in these new airport buildings and such, I've got to spend some time here doing these highways and interchanges properly as I build them. This of course means using one of the best mods ever made in the intersection marking tool and the node controller. This teamed up with the traffic manager mod means we can make these intersections really realistic, and they also run much smoother than the vanilla ones. So once I'd spent a couple of hours going around and doing all of those intersections, I had to get pretty creative here on this next bit to try and get an exit and an entry into this lower terminal at the front here. So I came up with these like curly roads that come out here, and they work surprisingly well at the end of this episode, but I wasn't too sure of them at this point when I was building them. They look great, but I don't know how realistic they are. I guess I'm still not sold on that front, but they work really well, and they do give the airport a point of difference at the very least. I definitely know what it's like with these airport episodes. You guys are going to let me know in the comments if I've stuffed anything up, that's for sure. So after a bit of stretching and jiggling around and using the node controller and the intersection marking tool again here, these are all in place now, these roads, and I can start detailing these up. And I've decided to put retaining walls in some spots, but ultimately this area is pretty untamed. Lots of long grass and scrub around, but a few trees lining the roads here and there that have been planted, and the idea with those was just to let you know if you're driving up to this airport that you're coming up to somewhere important, and just formalising that entrance a little more. The last things you'll see me add out the front here are things like highway signs directing you on where to go and which terminal is in which lane, and then I finish off the tunnel going underneath this terminal with a couple of rock prop walls and manipulating a couple of doors to look like tunnels with procedural objects. Alright, that's all the road done, so we can move on to some of the cool stuff. I'm extending some of these concourses so that we can put in a metro station and a train station that we're going to work on a bit later in the episode. And I'm trying to set these up so they're half in the concourse and half out, so I can do some custom stuff with them. Next I use these surface networks and cover over some of the roads here that are going underneath the terminal. I want to make it look like that this is the terrain height here and that those roads are tunneling underneath. So once I get those surface networks in, then it's about putting the retaining walls in where I need to along the sides of the road, and then putting some tunnels in. And what I can do is actually make them run for a good maybe 100 meters underneath the surface network, so when you look in it actually looks like a tunnel. And at the far end I'll just use a black door so it looks like a void. I'm not entirely sure why I decided to do this, because in real life these roads are open, but I guess I've always loved the idea of a tunnel, the mystery of it. You can see a road going in and you do your best to try and find out where it comes out and all of that. Next we follow suit with the episode up to this point and detail these intersections as we go, so node controller and intersection marking tool to the rescue here. And this particular interchange here, or intersection, splits off 3 different ways. The far top of the screen from this view goes to the bus stop, the middle one loops back around, and the bottom one goes out and into the city. So now I want to push on and build this big parking garage in the middle here, and it starts with a bus stop that I mentioned earlier on the ground here. This is going to be an actual working bus stop with connections directly to the Salesforce Transit Hub, and also to places like the San Francisco Pier, Pier 39, and also to the main station near the stadium. You'll also see me twirl a road up here. This is going to be following the levels that we're going to raise the car park. I want real traffic coming up here. Even though only the bottom story is actually going to be usable, I still want to make this look like it's a 3-storied garage. So in the end, everything you see here on the 2nd and 3rd level is pretty much just props apart from the road, but that bottom level that's out of view is full of real cars and that bus stop. So now we've got our car park set, we've got a bus line coming in, the connections off the highway are all ready to go. We can now put the runways and taxiways and all that sort of stuff down, and I have really no idea about the technical side of airports. I don't know how long these runways should be or anything like that, but I guess I'm doing what looks appropriate for the city scale wise, and also what looks appropriate for the airport here. So following that San Francisco blueprint, I've got to terraform some extra bits here, and my terraformer is finally working again, albeit probably only for about an hour before it starts to go funky again, but while it's working, let's terraform these bits out here we need. So from my observations, these extra pieces of terraform land out here are just so we can extend the 4 different runways out a bit further. Once I've got these reasonably square and pretty close with the terraformer, I can run these runways out here and then start to think about putting some sort of edging or retaining wall around the edge of the terrain. It also looks like a lot of the grass in this area is not grass whatsoever. A lot of it is just browned off. It's got different marks and different things going on, but there really isn't many signs of grass whatsoever. So in regards to those things, I use Ronix's dock edge to put an edge around this part of the airport. Then I use some surface networks to make it look like they meet neatly with the terrain, and finally I use the ore resource to make the ground look like it's sort of a burnt colour to make it look more appropriate for an airport. So in terms of the runway, I think it's about 200 units in-game long that I make it, and like I said earlier, this just looks appropriate. I don't know if that's right or not. And to get these guys to intersect, I just use the Anarchy mod that I've always got on, and I think I lowered one just a fraction lower than the other so that they sort of meet up a bit nicer. I'm running a taxiway around the edge of the retaining wall here to cover some funky stuff, and with the runways all done now, I can start going back and working on the concourse and getting everything ready to put in the plane stands. It's really quite cool how they've made this new DLC, how we can just stretch out these concourses, make them every which way and direction that we want to, and it's fair to say there is going to be no 2 airports ever made the same with this new DLC, which is just great. I also know, however, that that's going to mean I'm forever upgrading my airports, and this one's going to be no exception. So looking at this, I'm a little bit upset that it's not exactly centre, but it's working and it doesn't look bad, so I'm happy with that. We can push on now and put some of these plane stands in. So there's 3 different types of plane stand. We've got large, medium and small. So I'm going to start by putting in as many large ones as I can on this main hub directly in the middle, and then I'm going to filter my way down through the medium ones, and then finally the small ones, jamming them in wherever I can. And I think in the end I get something like 18 different plane stands in, which is really cool. The airport just buzzes at the end. So I've got to mention again that I don't know how realistic these taxiways are. They may be too close to the runway, they may be on inappropriate angles, I'm not too sure. I'm just plumbing these up so they work. I mean, with that many different types of plane stands, I'm just happy finding a taxiway that works. Once we're finished, I haven't got any planes waiting or being held up, so I think that's job done. To finish off these taxiways, I want to have some coming directly across the runway at a 45 so that some planes can jut in and get to their destination, or the planes stand a little bit quicker if they need to, or they're able to. So it's another day here in City Skylines, and it's another bit of funk going on here. This piece of nastiness seems to be moving its way around the map, but at this point I know how to handle it, so I'm not too worried. I just put the smooth brush on it and run over it very quickly and it pops back to normal. So once I get that sorted, I'm still panicking a little bit, so I want to check the airport and make sure it's all working, make sure it's leveling up and moving in the right direction. And I've got to say, it's going very, very slow, but it is moving up. And just when I think things are going really, really well, I find these planes here landing on the edge of the bloody map. And even up to this point here, I still haven't figured out how to stop this. I have minimized it because they're stopping them from landing at the airport, and that's what we want to see. So bugger me days, let's move on. So everything is well and truly in place now and working really, really well, so I can come and do the final detailing. And following the San Francisco blueprint, we've got a bit of a rocky coast over on this side here. That's what I'm putting in. I also add a couple of hangars to this area because A, I've got the room, and B, I need to raise the attractiveness of the airport to reach the next level. The last real thing of note here is I put these green blast shoulders in that I found on the workshop, which are very iconic looking. And these are exactly what they have in San Francisco, so I was very pleased to find these on the workshop. Let's move back to the metro and the train station that we put in earlier and start detailing and extending the tracks. So the metro here in this instance is going to run down to the far end of the airport and service just the airport area, and the train station is going to run and link up with downtown. Both tracks are doing a very gentle 90-degree turn as they exit the station, and it's worth noting that the metro is raised because I want that to go over a few different areas to make it to its destination within the airport boundaries. The rest of this area is just concrete with a couple of refueling tanks and just some random props here and there, and I've also made a point to bring a bit of nature in here. Some of it is a bit overgrown and a bit uncared for, and I'm hoping that this helps push the realistic theme a bit more. So now I want to flip around to the front and start detailing around by the entrances to the stations. And it's definitely more function than fashion here. All I'm doing is putting some gardens around these clear pathways here, and then I put this yellow decal in that you might have seen at airports that shows you which direction to walk from terminal to terminal. So I mentioned earlier these stations are half plugged into the concourse and half out, and the entrance that's half out is where I run my pedestrian path in. Then I finish the area off with some nice plants and trees. So with those pretty much plumbed in and ready to go, I was pretty excited to get these train lines in here, especially the one coming from downtown. I wanted to see passengers coming up to the airport, and this was also going to help us get to the next level. And then the last thing I do here is install the cargo airport, and I've put it down here at the very end of the airport so that I've got a nice connection here directly onto the highway for the trucks. I would definitely prefer that the trucks weren't coming through that main entrance that we built earlier, and we're also going to have our metro run in here and end here. So we've got direct access from this end of the airport to that main terminal with that metro. So here I just put down this big cargo hub that was included with the DLC, and then the cargo plane stands connect directly to that. I also want to put a train hub in here as well, because we're right next to the train line here, and this particular train line runs to our oil area and then it runs to our cargo port as well. So this is a perfect spot to put this little hub. Next I connect up all the roads to get it all working and the taxiways so that we can get some planes landing in here, and I decide to expand out because I've really got no choice. I need more room here. This is already a massive airport and yeah, I need more room. So this is sort of butting up to an area we made earlier that looks like it's being developed, which is quite coincidental because it kind of looks really good next to the airport. It looks like we're still building something new out here, maybe a new terminal for the metro or something. So with that in mind, I actually connect the metro up here, but I don't want it looking like a normal metro. I want this looking like it's still under construction sort of. So I put it in a big shed. I use procedural objects to cover this stop with a shed and then leave it next to this paddock that looks like it's being developed. The last things you'll see me do before the cinematics are just detail around that a little bit more. I also put a few more pillars in where we need to on our raised metro and tweak it so that it's directly above our train line. So hopefully in another week or so all the mods have caught up and been updated and we don't see much of this funk left, because there's still a little bit here if you look close. A massive shout out to all of the people that have been maintaining their mods though. I know you guys work so hard, so thank you so much for that, and I hope you guys have enjoyed the episode. That has been a blast putting that together, just so much fun. There's so many airports and good builds going on right now. I hope I've inspired you guys and given you some ideas. Give us a thumbs up if you've enjoyed the episode, and I hope to see you on the next episode. Look after yourselves guys, see you later.